Hey y'all, just real quick before we dive into the main program, I just want to give a quick word about the platform that I'm using, Anchor FM. It's been a good platform so far with the program and just distributing. It's a multi-platform sort of deal, so it sends out to Spotify, Google, iTunes, a whole list of hosting sites. So it's definitely a good place to start if you're a beginner or who wants to step into this field. You really don't need any experience at all. You just do it, right? So the sponsorship has been a good deal for me so far, and definitely a good way to build on the program that you want to distribute or you want to record. So yeah, so definitely check it out, Anchor FM. Also, if you want to skip these sponsorship intros, you can go to my Patreon, Collapse Talk, and for $1 you can get early access, ad-free access, as well as other exclusive content that I build on and work on. So definitely check it out there, Patreon. But yes, so now without further ado, we will jump into the main program. Hello, y'all. Welcome back. This is episode 23 of Collapse Talk, and this is your host, Gabriel. And let's dive right in as things have been evolving, transpiring, and yeah, this is just a new world, with the election still being contested at the moment and other details that we'll elaborate on. So, yeah, so welcome back. And if you saw in the last episode, we discussed the projected victory of President-elect Joe Biden, with Trump highly contesting it and his supporters calling out fraud, allegations of fraud. So yeah, so a lot to dive into. And in this program, we divide our segments into three parts. So we have the domestic field, the international field, and then the natural field. So just all the different aspects of collapse. But before I do that, I wanted to give a quick shout out to the first patron on Patreon, $1 monthly subscription, and he will get 48 hours of exclusive content on Patreon before I release it to the public. So at the moment, I'm kind of recording for one person, but you can feel free to join him and get earlier access to this show. So yeah, so without further ado, we'll dive right in. So with the domestic field, as I was talking about, President Joe Biden, or President-elect Joe Biden, is projected to win with an electoral college victory. Still some recounts and still some certification process to go through, but it's all the media outlets, including Fox News, they're all saying that he's won, and of course Trump is calling that into question, contesting that, and his supporters are calling out fraud. Now, I want to make clear that even though I might talk about fraud, it's not necessarily that I believe that there was fraud. I'm just, I want to, I do want to stay balanced and give the benefit of the doubt to any Trump supporters that are listening. It's just, now that they're actually investigating it, of course, you can say, well, they have an invested interest in not actually calling out fraud. It's hard because but this is a post-truth era, so you read one report from one source and you say, okay, well this seems credible, and then somebody else will say, well no, they have a reason not to report the truth, and then they might point out something else. So again, it's one of those situations where if fraud is being called out to, it's the job of whatever institution is in charge to actually investigate it, properly investigate it, and to, if there is fraud, to point it out and to correct it, or just to at least, um, you know, point out that there isn't fraud, that it's valid and things went through. I do believe our elections have been compromised, although to say that they're like, because the margin between the popular vote is pretty large. It's larger than it was with Hillary Clinton. So, to say that millions of votes have been fabricated and fraudulent, that's quite a stretch. And then there were some people saying, well, there was dead people voting, and then they actually was able to interview an elderly woman who did vote. I mean, it's not out of the question for somebody to be 112 and still be alive. I mean, my great grandmother, she lived to be 106, so it's not possible. So there's just a lot to go through, a lot to sift through, and the clock is ticking really because Trump still hasn't conceded. He's trying to drag this out for as long as possible, and that's just going to make things worse. Probably most likely he's doing it for some fundraising just to get as much money as possible out of his supporters. I believe already he's kind of said he hasn't said that Joe Biden. Well, he said that Joe Biden won, but he's trying to well, it's through tricks and fraud, and so he's trying to slowly ease into the acceptance, but he's not totally accepting it, and he's already talking about Trump TV, his own program. His supporters will emphatically support and donate to. So that he's going to keep it alive. He's going to try to. It's a con. It's what it is. It's a con. So he's going to try to swindle uh, everybody for every last penny, which, with these type of situations, he's going to swindle them, and then he's going to point and say, these people are the problem. They're the source of your grief, and he's going to run away with everything. It That's just how I'm seeing it, and this has just been a tactic of con artists throughout history, charismatic figures throughout history. So that's something to think about. So I wanted to talk, or I wanted to at least quote from 538 about his refusal to concede and the implications of that. So, quote, at nearly 2:30 a.m. Wednesday, the morning after Election Day 2016, the Associated Press declared Donald Trump the winner of the presidential election. Around the same time, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton phoned Trump to concede, a call she made at the urging of then President Barack Obama. That Thursday, less than 48 hours after election results, Obama met with his successor to help him prepare for the transition to the presidency. 4 years later, nothing like that has happened. More than a week has passed since major news outlets declared Joe Biden the winner, but Trump has refused to concede. Instead, his legal team is pushing efforts to invalidate the results, and his administration won't work with Biden officials on the transition to power. Top Republicans in Congress and around the country aren't openly acknowledging Biden's victory either. That some Republicans won't go along with the traditional niceties following a presidential election, like congratulating the victor from the opposing party, isn't that important. But the sitting president's refusal to acknowledge electoral defeat is worrisome, as it raises the prospect that he will not uphold a core tenet of democracy. Elections determine who is in power, and those who lose surrender power peacefully. The behavior of top Republican officials subtly acknowledging that Trump must leave office on January 20th, but not openly rebuking his conduct, in some ways also violates that core value. And the combination of Trump's and his party's behavior raises a serious question: is America's democracy in trouble? So yes, they're openly talking about in this article just his refusal, just the differences in to the transitions in power from 2016 and 2020 now. I mean, it was pretty open how Obama was, trying to have an open dialogue with Trump, stepping away from it. yeah, so we're definitely seeing a difference here with that transition. Let me read a little bit further. Quote, right? Not respecting the election results is problematic on its own, but considering the crisis the nation is facing now, a new surge in coronavirus cases, the Trump's actions are particularly dangerous. Now more than ever, an effective transition of power is of the utmost importance. Not only is Trump blocking his advisors from helping the incoming Biden administration get ready to deal with the pandemic, but the defeated president has largely disengaged from the COVID-19 crisis himself. In terms of managing the virus, America will be functionally without a president for 2 months. So, yeah, they're not even like giving him updates. I believe Mike Pompeo was saying something along the lines of, "Oh, we're ready to transition to Trump's second, term." So it's just like they're in like another world right now where, yeah, they won and they're going to hold on to power for as long as they can. Yeah, this has never really happened before. The closest I can think of was in the Reconstruction era. I'm forgetting the actual history there, but they had to go through some committees, and like the country was almost going to get launched into another war. So yeah, so this hasn't been, at least in modern American history, this hasn't really been a thing for the most part. The loser would concede, and yeah, and there'd just be a transition. So it's interesting there. And I believe also the army had made a statement saying along the lines of, they don't recognize or pledge allegiance to one individual. They pledge allegiance to the Constitution. And so that really shows you a signal on their stance and where they're standing. Not to say that there aren't officials in the army or just the Pentagon, Department of Defense that are pro-Trump. So it's definitely an odd place to be in, whether you're pro-Trump or pro the Constitution, or at least, because they would try to make it pro-Biden, but it's just like, no, this is yeah. So constitutional question, democracy question, and yeah, I mean, in other countries, this would be the groundworks for a coup. So we'll have to see there, because I mean, Trump already has his, following, right? But now the army and the military is in a weird spot where they're going to take orders from Biden, who is projected to be the president, and Trump, who's already in the White House. Yeah, it's going to be a weird place for them in the decision they have to make. So, it's going to go to court and they're going to fight it there. But then, if you have two people claiming to be the president, whose orders do you follow, right? Well, ostensibly, right now, you would follow Joe Biden's order, but until January 20th, you have to follow President Trump's orders. So it's going to be a weird situation, sticky situation. So there's that. With the Trump not conceding. And of course, they're having recounts in some states, or Georgia. Georgia is like basically the battleground right now. A lot of eyes are on Georgia, not just for the recount, but there's also a Senate runoff race. But in Georgia, the votes were very close, about 12,000 votes, or Joe Biden won the state by a margin of 12,000 votes. So I'm reading from CBS News. Quote, counties in Georgia are on pace to finish their hand recounts of votes cast in the presidential election by the state's fast approaching deadline. As President-elect Joe Biden's lead in the race has lessened to 12,000 votes over President Donald Trump, Gabriel Sterling, the state's voting system implementation manager, said Wednesday. Sterling briefed reports on the status of the audit that was ordered by Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger last week due to the narrow margin of votes between Mr. Biden and Mr. Trump. The deadline of the counties to complete the audit was 11:59 p.m. Wednesday, ahead of the Friday deadline for state certification. The hand recount of nearly 5 million votes stemmed from an audit required by new state law and wasn't in response to any suspected problems with the state's results or an official recount request. The law requires the audit to be done before the county's certified results can be certified by the state. Sterling said the counties are on a good pace for completing the audit in its scheduled time and stressed that election officials who have become a target of Mr. Trump's ire on Twitter are diligently following the law. More than 4.9 million ballots have been hand audited so far, with tens of thousands left, he said. Quote, "We're going to continue to follow the law and continue to follow our processes," Sterling said, adding that it was, quote unquote, frustrating to hear criticisms of the state's recount by the president. The system, he said, is working, or the system, he said, quote, is working the way it was intended, end quote. So, yeah, they're doing their counts there. And again, there were allegations that were coming, or just in a lot of swing states, there were just allegations of misconduct and, allegations. I need to make that clear. I say allegations not to cover my ass, but just that's what they are, allegations. So you have to investigate that, and whether or not it's true or not, it's very easy for Democrats to just write it off, but we still have to look into it to at least calm the other side down to say, hey, we've done our research and we didn't see anything, or here are some things that we did see. You can investigate that. So, yeah, when you try to get I do want to be fair, right? So it may come across as me being sympathetic, but it's more just, we need to at least make sure that our side was doing everything right. But yeah, they were doing recounts in Georgia, very close margin, although Trump or Biden was projected to win there. So we have the presidential race that's already been sorted out, but then we also have Senate or House elections that are still being underway, and particularly in Georgia, they have two Senate runoff elections, and that is something to keep a very close eye on because this could make or break the Senate majority for Democrats, and that could pose issues for gun laws and what else you want to look at. Yeah, so I'm reading this from Fox 5 Atlanta. Quote, a new exclusive insider advantage at Fox 5 Atlanta poll released on Tuesday takes a look at Georgia Senate races, Governor Brian Kemp's approval rating, and whether Georgians believe in the last election was fair. The poll that surveyed 800 registered likely voters in Georgia shows just how competitive Georgia has become. Georgia faces runoffs for both of the state's U.S. Senate seats, and the outcome will determine the power balance in the Senate next year. Here is the breakdown of the poll. So the Democratic, so there's two races, right? So for the first one, we have Democratic candidate Reverend Raphael Warnock at 49%. The Republican Senator Kelly Loeffler, hope I said that right. And then there's 3% undecided, and she's at 48%. And then the second race, the Republican candidate Senator David Perdue, Republican, at 49%, and John Ossoff, the Democratic candidate, at 49%. So a very close race here, and 2% undecided. And I'll read the article further. Insider Advantage Chairman Matt Towery said the challenge for the two Republicans will be to hold on to the over 10% level of support they have from African American voters, while at the same time trying to convert suburban Atlanta white voters who have drifted away from the GOP. Towery said the current ad campaign by Senator Loeffler against Reverend Warnock may have opened the can of worms that could lead to an erosion of that fragile level of support. So I believe in Georgia, it's just had some demographic changes, same as in Texas. I don't know the state very well. I mean, the big city that comes to mind is Atlanta, and there's other cities there too. So I could see Atlanta being the heart of the state, being a liberal heart of it. And also, yeah, demographic changes. So younger white voters are leaning more liberal, at least hypothetically. At least in Texas, there are. And then also we have black voters, elevating in their wealth status. So that's definitely another thing to look at. And of course, Republicans do have a good stronghold with African American voters. This time around, actually, Trump gained more African American voters and Latino voters than he did in 2016. So that is something to think about, and it is a trend to look at, not just for the presidency, but also for the Republican Party. I do believe the Republican Party is starting to change. I believe Marco Rubio was coming out saying that they have to make it more pro-worker, pro multi-ethnic party. So that's something to look at. But yeah, so this is definitely something to look at. It's very close for the incumbent Republicans, and of course these Democrats. Okay, well, yeah, it's close and something to look at. Of course, these polls can say whatever they need to say, but it's just we saw with the presidential election, it was wildly off. So who knows where these polls stand for local, state issues. But yeah, so we have this going on in Georgia, just another swing state. I'm sure there's other uh, recounts and other certification processes that have to be sorted. But with Georgia, I just wanted to point that out because it's been a bit of a focal point lately. Um, but yeah, we have all these certifications with the Electoral College that need to go underway, and the official certification doesn't. It needs to be filed within or by December 14th. And so when that happens, then that's when the official count starts. If that doesn't happen, then it's going to go through some other legal proceedings, which I haven't really brushed up on, but it just turns into a whole legal battle and it goes to the Supreme Court. So that's something to definitely look at. And a lot of people are making points about how already there are, three justices. So we have Brett Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett, and Clarence Thomas. But they all have something against the Democrats and against Joe Biden personally, especially with Clarence Thomas. Um, so that'll be interesting to see if it does go to the Supreme Court, where, well, it depends on what they're taking it to court on. And then again, this is something that, I mean, I'm sure y'all have looked at more informed people about this issue, but it's going to be interesting how long this is going to drag out and what this means for the greater, implication with people getting in the way. So I wanted to read this from Financial Times, considering the certification process. So, quote, as Donald Trump continues to dispute his election loss, the outgoing president is approaching a series of deadlines that will further cement Joe Biden's victory. States are certifying the results over the next few weeks in a staggered process ahead of December 14th, the date on which the Electoral College formally meets to confirm the next president. The lengthy timeline provides space for Mr. Trump to cast further doubt on the clear verdict of the American people and to block the transition process to Mr. Biden's administration, even if he has little hope of overturning the results. Quote, as a technical matter, it's inconsequential if the president fuses about the outcome of the election because it's not a fully decided process until all of these steps have taken place, said Russell Riley, co-chair of the Miller Center's Presidential Oral History Program. Quote, the broader picture is it is a violation of all the expectations of the office and a violation of the standards of fair play that makes democracy possible, he added. Though voting ended on November 3rd, U.S. states each have their own processes for ensuring a reliable count that typically involves multiple checks, laws that are particular to each state, and varying deadlines. In Georgia, the certification deadline is November 20th. After completing an initial tally, the state has embarked on a hand recount of every presidential vote as part of an audit. Pennsylvania, where Mr. Trump has mounted most of his lawsuits, has a November 23rd deadline for counties to submit their final vote totals. The Trump campaign is seeking a court order to prevent the state from certifying its results. In states including Georgia, the results are certified by the elected Secretary of State, but the process is more idiosyncratic. Elsewhere, offering Mr. Trump opportunities to throw a spanner in the gears. In Michigan, the results are certified by a four-person board that has 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans, raising the prospect to a deadlock. The board has a 20-day window from November 20th to complete the certification with at least 3 votes. So yeah, so there's a whole bunch of different deadlines. Actually, let me read here real quick. There's a whole list of deadlines. So November 20th is Georgia. November 23rd is a deadline for Pennsylvania, and also that 20-day window for Michigan. November 30th is the deadline for Arizona. December 1st, deadline for Nevada and Wisconsin. Uh, December 8th, safe harbor date, promising states their electoral vote will be counted if finalized by this deadline. December 14th, okay, then electors must meet to cast their votes. So yeah, there's a whole process. So it's, the electors have to meet and cast that out, and it's we see this partisanship already. The Democrats are on one side, the Republicans are on another side, and this is just going to further split those frays, right? So imagine like you have a frayed cut in your jacket or a piece of clothing, but you keep pulling on it, it's just going to continue to stretch and rip out. Yeah, I don't see this getting any better with this certification, and uh, it's state by state. So there could be states that are completely in deadlock, and then that could go to Supreme Court. Yeah, so this is it's interesting to see the least, and you know yeah, nobody would really know about this because the media is already calling it, but they're not going to tell you about this certification process. And then you explain it to people, and they're going to be like, "Well, the electoral college is bullshit anyway." And yeah, so it gets very muddy with this sort of situation. But that's just something to look at. But we have the certification deadline on December 14th. However, on December 11th, we have a deadline for the government budget, the national budget for next year. And I can already see that this is going to be another shutdown. And this is what everybody needs to pay attention on. So, reading from Forbes, and the title says that Senate Republicans release $1.4 trillion spending plan without COVID-19 relief ahead of December 11th government shutdown deadline. Quote, as Congress enters a contentious lame duck session in which some Republican leaders have yet to acknowledge President-elect Biden's victory, Senate Republicans on Tuesday released a $1.4 trillion spending proposal to fund the government ahead of the looming December 11th shutdown deadline. And some facts, right? The package consists of 12 separate bills that constitute the Republicans' opening offer negotiations with Democrats over the 2021 budget. It follows a continuing resolution passed by Congress in September, just hours ahead of the previous shutdown deadline, which extended the 2020's appropriation in the short term to give Congress more time to determine the government budget in the new fiscal year. The new package from the GOP would allocate nearly $700 billion in defense spending, nearly $70 billion in Homeland Security funding, $3.2 billion in the Food and Drug Administration, and nearly $2 billion for a border wall. Funding for NASA, health research, and veterans programs would increase significantly, the Associated Press reported, while funding for foreign aid and education programs would see smaller boosts. Democrats were quick to lambast the package for its lack of adequate funding for coronavirus relief, but Republicans want to address COVID-19 relief measures in separate legislation. Chief critic, quote, this country is heading for a deadly winter, and it is long past time for us to provide the resources the country needs to get this virus under control and our economy back open. Senator Patrick Leahy, Vice Chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee, said in a statement, these bills do not provide any such relief. And I'll continue further. Leaders in both chambers, including Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, have emphasized the need for an omnibus spending bill in the lame duck session of Congress, not another continuing resolution, lawmakers will also focus on another coronavirus aid bill in the coming months or coming weeks, though that effort may end up being secondary to reaching a budget agreement to keep the government running. Republicans and Democrats remain far apart on a number of key issues like state and local aid and liability protections for businesses related to new relief legislation, and it is not clear whether a new relief bill can pass before President-elect is inaugurated in January. So, yeah, we got all this voting for us. Notice how they're already you know advocating for 700 billion in defense spending. So they're just right now, and I can already see Joe Biden adding more to that. So yeah, I don't. They always try to bolster our military, and it's funny how they call it defense, but we're the most offensive military on the planet right now. So it's kind of just doesn't really make much sense. Yeah, and 70 billion in homeland security. So you see where they're really prioritizing everything. It's military, defense spending, homeland security, and then 3 billion for Food and Drug Administration, 2 billion for a border wall. Yeah. So I mean that's just what we have to deal with right now. I do see how a battle over coronavirus relief is going to cause issues for this bill, at least. The Democrats are going to want to add relief in there, and they're saying they want to do it in a separate bill, but it's just going to be more gridlock. We'll see about that Senate race in Georgia, how that goes, and then maybe they can tip the favors for the Democrats. It's just, I always see that there's always trade-offs, right? So if we get the Democrats in power, they maybe will could decriminalize drugs or marijuana at least, maybe some student aid relief or cancellation, maybe a public option for healthcare, but that's a maybe. So they're saying, okay, yeah, we might give you these things, but then the gun control laws, that's going to be a thing without a doubt. You can rest assured that's what they're going to fight on for sure. And then of course the trade-offs with Republicans is the perception of, well, we can have our guns, and of course they're still going to have neoliberal or neoconservative actually principles, corporate interests, bank interests, lobbies. So I mean, yeah, they're both bought off, but you see, like with one group you have to trade something for another thing. It's just like, yeah, again, kind of going on a tangent there, but yeah, this it's going to be a battle in Congress over spending, government spending, relief, and the longer because it's going to be shut down. There's going to be a shutdown, and the longer there's a shutdown, the more pressure people are going to have, especially for like SNAP relief, right? Food aid. I mean, unemployment benefits. I mean, like if this drags on for weeks, there's going to be issues. There's going to be real problems. So yeah, I believe somewhere they said civilization is 9 meals away from anarchy. So they need to sort that out quickly, because it's not just pay for government employees, but also welfare programs and relief and the issues that can cause from there. So there's that. Yeah, the relief or the budget, and no COVID relief. No COVID relief for businesses. No stimulus for regular people. I mean, it's just every time I think about it, it's hilarious. It's pretty funny that we just got $1,200. That was it. Just here you go, buy something nice, and it's almost 6 months since we've had that relief, right? 6 months, yeah. And there's like no that everybody just okay, just get back to work. That's the solution. That's your relief. Get back to work, which is not a it's not a terrible thing to say. Of course, you want people to get back to work, but it's just like everything else is the same. You guys still pay all your I mean, they cut interest rates for student loans, right? But yeah, I mean, the bank still needs to get its due. These landlords, they still need their due. So there's no relief for that. Meanwhile, all the food prices are rising. Like the cost of living is rising, but the wages are stagnant, still the same. No relief, no UBI. I mean, you know, you might call that socialism, okay, but you might as well sprinkle a little bit of socialism, right? Before you create an environment where you have a true Marxist uprising, right? Where they just want to do away with all the capitalist systems and you get something worse. So, yeah, I think that's where a lot of people are missing because we need relief. These are not normal times. If this was a normal, peaceful time, then yes, going back to work, that should be nothing. But we don't have that right now. And what jobs are available exactly? Telling somebody to go to work, find a job when you're fine and dandy, living large. I mean, not to say you're not struggling, but you know, to tell somebody when you know that doesn't have a lot to just get a job. It's like, oh, that's so easy, right? That's so easy, especially now. So yeah. Anyway, not to rant about that, but we just talking about this relief or this national budget, and I stated before that when the government shuts down, there could be some real market issues. I mean, there could be a lot that can go wrong with that. So it's just something to keep an eye on. December 11th. Maybe get your preps in order by then, and we'll see what happens after that. So yeah, so I wanted to talk about that, but also I wanted to talk about a event or incident that happened over the weekend. So of course, Trump supporters are demonstrating throughout the country, marching, and they're trying to say they stole the election, stop the steal. That's what they're calling it, MAGA march. And yeah, so they had a march, a rally in the capital city, Washington D.C., and it kind of went underreported in the news outlets. I'm not sure exactly what they were reporting on, but they didn't really cover, except for like independent sources on social media. But they went to this MAGA march, and then the BLM, Antifa, liberal, left-wing protesters or counter-protesters met them there, and people just started fighting. People were fighting in the streets. The city was, in anarchy. And I was watching one video from Jorge Ventura, and he was just following it. And I can't necessarily take a side on one side's innocent. It's just like both of y'all are kind of dumb right now, especially like now if you're going out in the streets. Like, I'm not gonna go out of my way to a protest now because you're just inviting trouble. You're inviting somebody to get in your face and scream at you, even if like you're on the same side. Like, just one minor disagreement could elevate to a shouting match. And like, look, if you're out in the streets, that's not the place for an intellectual conversation. People are trying to have a debate. Like, oh, you go ahead and like once you're out in the streets, that is done. It's gone. Because there's too much going on, and then you could be saying something that's not as popular, and you don't know if somebody's going to come behind you and punch you in the face and knock you out, stomp you out. Like that's what just happens. And yeah, so because everybody's trying to point, well, this guy's the victim. One Trump supporter got knocked out and punched. People are saying that he started the fight. It's just like violence begets violence. So once you're going out in the street looking for a fight, you're kind of you're not innocent, obviously. And then if you get stomped out, that's wrong, of course. So that other person needs to be held accountable because they shouldn't have been assaulting others. So it's just, and then there's kids involved. Like, why are you bringing your child to this in a time like this? Like if you're bringing your kid to a rally in a time like this, it's highly, politically charged and dangerous. People have been killed already. Like it's just, and they're getting caught in the fray. Again, when I talk about civil war, civil unrest, We're already seeing the battle lines being drawn. People are already being attacked. People are being killed already. It's already happening. It's just not the establishment, North and South. It's not that kind of civil war. It's the people fighting against each other. And of course, the elites are perfectly fine if we attack each other and not band together and look at them. So that's that's what happened in the city. And again, there might be another rally this weekend and another event could occur. And the Proud Boys were out in the street protecting the MAGA protesters. I mean, this is just, it's weird and it's not good. This is not good. We already have people battling in the streets. It's not, especially in the capital city, when the capital city is effectively under siege by its own people, that's not really a healthy sign for a nation or a republic when the capital city is experiencing that kind of chaos and unrest. So that's something that caught my eye. Kind of, yeah, just it's certainly going to escalate. Unfortunately, it just appears that it keeps escalating. Like, oh, this is done. All right, Biden is president. This is not done. It's just getting started. So that's something to look at. But who knows if Trump will actually call these people down and say, hey, stand down. But he's not. He's not going to do that. He's going to continue to poke the beast and yeah. So it's going to be interesting when he keeps his game up for long enough that his supporters, they realize that they've been played, and then they turn to somebody who knows what they're doing and isn't trying to play his people. Like, no, I want us to win. Like, again, that's what typically happens here. So there's that. So you had that MAGA march, fighting that broke out, and somebody got stabbed too. So it got pretty violent, and this violence is going to continue. They're not going to stop. They're already chanting "fuck Trump" and "fuck Biden" too. So like, this is not ending. People think it's over. It's not over, man. It's just getting started. So there's that. And then we have, of course, in the United States, this COVID pandemic, and we are. Some saying it's the second wave. Some are saying it's the third wave. But as was predicted, the winter months coming in are going to see a spread, uncontrolled spread. I mean, just all over the country. It's just unmitigated. There's nothing we can do. We're reaching already at 11 million cases. That's what they're saying. Reading from BBC, quote, high schools and colleges are taught on-site teaching, while restaurants are prohibited from offering indoor dining. In Michigan from Wednesday, indoor restaurant dining is also banned in Washington state, and gyms, cinemas, theaters, and museums will be closed, and much of California will return to its most severe restriction level. On average, more than 1,000 people a day are dying from the virus, and the overall death toll is close to 250,000. Hospital admissions have also reached record levels with nearly 150,000 new cases across the U.S. on Monday. The Trump administration struck an optimistic note on Friday, saying it hoped to distribute 20 million doses of an approved vaccine in December and for each month after that, although vaccine has yet to get official approval. And continuing, President-elect Joe Biden said on Monday that people may die because of the White House's refusal to facilitate a presidential transition and coordinate with the Biden team for a vaccination campaign. The lack of cooperation is totally irresponsible, he said. On Monday, in a major new development, the U.S. drug company Moderna said its COVID-19 vaccine has nearly 95% effective according to early results. And a similar announcement earlier this month about another vaccine from the companies Pfizer and BioNTech sent stock markets soaring amid hopes that life could return to normal next year. So yeah, we're seeing cases rise pretty quickly. Drastic rise in cases. Of course, they're announcing a vaccine that came out. You know, I'm not an anti-vax person, but I'm definitely gonna hold out for as long as possible on this and see if, people are getting sick from this, what kind of effect it does have on the population. It will be interesting about like mandatory vaccines and if you have to have proof that you were vaccinated with this disease. So, and whether or not they deny certain rights to you. Now we're in Texas, so I don't think it's going to get that bad. But you're going to see in places like Michigan and California where they're going to make you uh, do it. There's going to be certain legal or state, uh, yeah, some sort of record to keep track of you. I believe in Michigan actually, like there was one article I read where hospital or restaurants and other facilities are going to they have you sign in with your name and phone number for contact tracing purposes, which to me is just more like tracking purposes in general, just to, track where your movements are. You know, this is getting very strange. And I'm noticing that a lot of this is in the interest of not just the government, but also like you see that a lot of the lockdowns, right, that are occurring are greatly benefiting corporations. So of course we see with the lockdowns, Amazon stock rose dramatically, and also we're seeing those that are hit hardest with this lockdown are the small businesses, mom and pop shops. So a lot of them have closed down, but these corporations, they got bailouts and people are turning to them more. So yeah, these corporations are going to continue to consolidate power within the economy and also just with the government in general. So they're going to say, well, you need to lock down because we're going to get more money. So yeah, that's something to look at. But yeah, already people are talking about this vaccine, how life can go back to normal. It's not, but yeah, this is something to look at. Again, yeah, I'm because everybody has their own opinion about vaccines. I got vaccinated for the flu shot. It's just peace of mind, really. And, you know, not to say that vaccines don't have adverse effects for certain people. It's a case by case thing, but more often than not, you're going to develop an immunity, and more often than not, you're going to be healthy with it. But again, this is a new vaccine, so we're just going to have to see. Again, it's at your discretion. I'm not going to tell you what you should or shouldn't do. I'm just saying what I'm going to do, and I'm going to wait with that. But yeah, so we have, not only the COVID spread and the the vaccine reports that are coming out, but just what these implications are for the holidays. That's typically how people get infected is when they go to these parties, these house parties, and then it spreads from there. I mean, I've been just sitting here thinking about what I should do, and already people are kind of pressuring me to go. So I'm gonna go. I'm gonna try to stay as little time as possible. So just for a day or two, Thanksgiving Day, Black Friday, I'm out. Um, and people are gonna complain about that, but look, like this is real, and just in general, like being in Houston, I don't like it. I just don't like being in Houston, so I just want to be out of the city as fast as possible. So we'll see about that, and then of course we have the Christmas holidays there, and I'm going to try to spend as little time as possible. Same situation. People get all butthurt about it. Why aren't you spending time with us? It's like, dude, I'm just trying to stay by myself because this is how I'm going to survive. And people are like, oh, you managed to avoid this disease. Yeah, because I live alone and I have little interaction with people, which is the most guaranteed way to stay alive in this time and place. So, yeah, I mean, I have my pet, so I'm not alone, but, more human contact would be good. It's just, this is a very different time. So, yeah, not to say I don't like spending time with family and the holidays are something to look forward to. So, that's just something that's going to have to play out and see what happens. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. The holidays. Of course, everybody has their own peace of mind about the situation now. And every time the holidays roll around, I just think to myself, well, it's gonna be shittier next year. Like, I just, yeah, I'm just like stuck thinking to myself, well, just enjoy this now because this might not be the same situation next year, you know? Either yeah, some kind of disaster or war breaks out, you know? So, yeah, everybody, it's funny, like with World War II, when that broke out, everybody thought they were going to be home by Christmas, you know. So it's that sort of thing where like people reflect on the events of the year and what's going to follow. And I just think it's going to get worse, just naturally. 2021, most likely some sort of economic fallout will occur. And who knows after that. So, yeah, but we have the holidays rolling around. Um, But then we also have this spread of the pandemic and the threat of second lockdowns or just looming lockdowns. But we already see some panic buying kind of stir up. Like it's kind of starting again. So I'm going to have to start buying my toilet paper. That's the one thing I was missing on. But I'm good on food. I'm good on water. So I'm good in those areas. So, I'm just going to have to start eating into my reserves now because I'm starting to lose space. But yeah, panic buying is going to rise again, and that's going to be interesting to watch because people didn't learn. People didn't learn this time, and what I've learned certainly, especially with the first lockdown, is don't tell people anything. So I'm going to keep my mouth shut this time because the first lockdown, I was concerned about other people, my friends, my family. I was concerned about their survival, but they were just in la la land and they didn't see it. They did not see it, and you know I was in the position of frustration, so of course I came across as being, excited and panicky, but it was more just urgency, like, dude, I'm not worried about myself. I'm worried about you, but of course I can't say that now, and it's just better off to not say anything, you know, because I've already learned who I'm going to work with and who I'm just going to leave to their own device, you know, even my own family, my own blood, because there's nothing that I can say that's going to wake them up. Like reality needs to wake them up. That's just, and I'm not saying that I'm ready. Like I'm not, but I'm not afraid for myself. It's just more other people who have their head in the sand. And, you know, yeah, it's just better off to have a small circle of people who know what they're doing than to just try to rope everybody in because there's nothing you can do. Yeah, you can take a mule to water, but you can't make him drink it, right? So yeah, when the panic buying begins again, I'm gonna keep my mouth shut and stay put. Just need to get more toilet paper, right, and some other toiletries and other condiments. But yeah, I mean, the second lockdown is gonna be much worse. It's gonna be much worse. More businesses will shut down. Like something like 40% of businesses are going to shut down for good if another lockdown goes into effect. And already in states, Michigan, like they're already doing the lockdown. So I mean, state by state, we'll see. Of course, we're in Texas. I'm in Texas, so they're really going to try to hold out on the lockdown for as long as possible, which I'm kind of glad for. Yeah, but that's just the position that we're in, really, sadly. And having to look out for that. That means second lockdown could precipitate a bubble burst, right? A crash. I mean, looking at the Dow Jones and during the first lockdown, that was just like I don't know why. Sometimes when I see like the Dow Jones just fall completely, because I have no money in the stock market, so just watching it collapse was kind of like, wee, just like how low can we go? Like that was I don't know. Just like seeing all this unfold, it's just funny from my position because I have nothing to lose. Of course, the greater toll on society would be devastating, but personally for myself, I'm not losing anything. So it's just funny to watch. Although now I've been trying to like make some saving accounts, so it is something to look at, but it's not like I have thousands of dollars in it. So yeah, it's just, you know, yeah, something to keep an eye on, the markets. But again, I just read somewhere or read that like it's really just a line about rich people's feelings. That's really, yeah, that's what it is. Yeah. So we'll have to see there with the second lockdown. But I'm also seeing a lot of this economic turmoil. People are just talking about the Great Reset, right, with the New World Order. So that's something to look at, uh, particularly with the United States, the world order here, and yeah, I mean, these corporations are going to continue to consolidate power. The world bankers are going to continue to do that. Globalists, you know, they're trying to institute their own order, right, on the world. So it's just something to look at, really, something to examine. But yeah, I mean, the markets they're going to tumble. There's going to be a lot of unrest there. So yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to talk about with the domestic area, and then moving into the international segment. Still talking about Trump, I just want to talk about how the world leaders are reacting to it. You know, yeah, a lot of the world leaders are just already calling Joe Biden, congratulating him. Even like Boris Johnson, he's kind of referring to Trump as the previous president. So, yeah, you already see in the United States, they're trying to, delegitimize Joe Biden, but already in the eyes of the world, Trump has lost. A particular certain powers haven't really said anything just yet, including Mexico. Russia hasn't congratulated Joe Biden yet. So yeah, there's certainly like some countries that are waiting to see what happens, and other countries are already backing up Joe Biden. So it's just interesting to see that. And again, I keep bringing up the topic of civil war, which at this point is kind of cliched, like, oh, really, civil war? But you know, if push did come to shove and some sort of civil conflict erupted, well, not just between the paramilitary groups, the partisan groups, but also between the establishment, right? If that happened, you would see a lot of the world leaders behind Joe Biden, and then Trump having the support of his own group, and then us people trying to stay independent and out of fight will be caught in the middle. So it's going to be interesting. And then, of course, the question comes up of, who are you going to fight for, or myself? I mean, I don't want to fight anyone, so I'd rather stay out of it. As a survivalist, you're better off avoiding ideological fights, political fights. It's just not worth it, really. Uh, I will say this much: whichever side brings the PLA onto our soil, that is going to be a major thing for me. And if that does happen, even in the form of blue helmets, and the PLA is the People's Liberation Army, the army of the Communist Party of China, if that ever were to occur, then whoever did bring those troops onto our soil would be my enemy. That's all I'm saying. So, or just any foreign troops in general, because we can't tolerate that, because you're bringing foreign troops because your side, your forces aren't enough. Well, guess what? If your side wins with the foreign troops and you try to tell them to leave, they're not going to leave. And then you become a protectorate of whatever power is in control. So that's why. Again, enough about that. That's a really hypothetical situation. Uh, but yeah, so yeah, world leaders are stepping away from Trump, except for like, dictatorships like Lukashenko in Belarus was making a comment saying, "Oh, well, he lost to fraud or something like that," and he would know about fraud. His own people are rising up against him. And actually, in Belarus, they were having protests and demonstrations where like 1,000 were arrested because a demonstrator was killed by undercover police. So that's so there, yeah, that's happening there, right? Lukashenko is experiencing his own people against him, and already there were strikes being called. So like that's escalating there. And then we have in our country where people are just soft. People are really soft. I mean, the idea of a revolution like is kind of laughable, especially for the United States, because we talk all these ideas of overthrowing a tyrannical government, but like our country, our government's beyond tyrannical, and we're doing nothing, mainly because of the distractions and the luxuries that we got. The bread and games mentality. So people are very soft. So the only reason they would be out in the streets is because all those creature comforts are gone, and then that's just total and utter chaos. And that's you're not going to find any statesmen there or people trying to you know bring something better. It's just chaos at that point. People rioting in the streets. So yeah. So enough about that, really. Um, just moving onward with the international segment. But I was talking about a uh, conflict between the Armenians and Azeris over the Nagorno-Karabakh region. And recently, what came out, or the day after I released my last episode, because Azeri forces took control of stronghold Susha, and after that point, there was a ceasefire brokered by Russia between these two countries, and the Armenians aren't exactly happy over it. It's not necessarily saying that they lost, but they had to concede a lot. So I'll read from NPR. Quote, some 2,000 Russian peacekeepers are said to arrive in Nagorno-Karabakh to oversee a new ceasefire aimed at halting the heaviest fighting in decades between Azerbaijan and ethnic Armenians for control of the breakaway region. The announcement of the new Kremlin-backed deal sparked unrest in Armenia, where protesters poured into the streets and stormed the main government building to oppose an agreement they see as one-sided after thousands were killed in the fighting. By contrast, there were celebrations in the street in parts of Azerbaijan. Russian President Vladimir Putin called the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh truly a great tragedy and said he hoped that the agreement would create a long-term peace and set up necessary conditions for long-lasting and full-scale settlement of the crisis over Nagorno-Karabakh. That crisis erupted in late September when Azerbaijan launched a military push to retake parts of Nagorno-Karabakh, an ethnic Armenian enclave that is located within the borders of Azerbaijan. And let me actually slide a little forward about the actual deal. Okay, so yes, so under the ceasefire, Azerbaijan will keep territory it gained in recent fighting. Armenia will return control of 3 districts in Nagorno-Karabakh to Azerbaijan over the next few weeks. Among the regions, Armenia is to hand over Lachin, with its main road linking Nagorno-Karabakh to Armenia. The so-called Lachin corridor is set to be kept open by some 2,000 Russian peacekeepers deployed with a 5-year mandate to oversee the agreement. The deal also calls for transport links to be established between Azerbaijan and Nakhchivan, a landlocked semi-autonomous Azerbaijani exclave surrounded by Armenia, Iran, and Turkey. The ceasefire also provides for an exchange of soldiers captured in the fighting and bodies of the dead. Yeah, and of course, Armenians weren't exactly happy about it. The Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan, in a Facebook message, said that it was extremely painful for me personally and for our people, with these concessions. And the people out in the streets were protesting, shouting, "We won't give up our land." And they stormed government buildings. And yeah, so yeah, the Armenians were protesting this agreement. They were claiming it's a bit one-sided, and they were actually attacked. So imagine you getting attacked and then you being forced into an agreement where you've lost land, you've had to give up concessions. Yeah, So that's what happened there. And of course, people were sour about it. People were protesting. In Azerbaijan, people were celebrating the victory. So it's good at least that this has been resolved now before it got out of control. Most of the fighting was relegated to this region, this Armenian enclave, you know, within Azerbaijan. So it is internationally recognized as Azerbaijan, although it's ethnic Armenians who control it. So yeah, basically the Armenians have to withdraw from that area, or Armenian forces. Who knows about the actual Armenian, residents, civilians in that area, whether they're going to leave or stay there. Uh, but yeah, but even with this like localized fighting, there were already reports of atrocities and executions by the Azeris and also Turkish forces. So yeah, but for now, peace has been established because they had tried to make ceasefires, but that just fell through. But this is at least a long standing for now. There's going to be Russian peacekeepers there. Uh, but yeah, so that's at least been settled. This little forgotten war, but we'll just have to examine other situations that occur. So there's that with the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. I wanted to touch up on China because we always keep an eye on China on this program. And what came out was that UK ambassadors were calling for sanctions against China for breaching the Hong Kong Treaty. And so I'll read from Reuters. Britain on Thursday, or quote, Britain on Thursday said China had broken its main bilateral treaty on Hong Kong by imposing new rules to disqualify elected legislators in the former British colony, cautioning that it would consider sanctions as part of its response. The British flag was lowered over Hong Kong when the colony was handed back to China in 1997 after more than 150 years of British rule imposed after Britain defeated China in the First Opium War. Hong Kong's autonomy was guaranteed under the One Country, Two Systems Agreement enshrined in 1984. Sino British Joint Declaration signed by then Chinese Premier Zhao Ziyang and British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. Beijing's imposition of new rules to disqualify elected legislators in Hong Kong constitutes a clear breach of legally binding Sino-British Joint Declaration, Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab said. China has once again broken its promise and undermined Hong Kong's high degree of autonomy. Britain summoned China's ambassador Liu Xiaoming to express its deep concerns, and Raab's deputy, Nigel Adams, told Parliament that it was considering possible sanctions on individuals over China's actions. Quote, we will continue to consider designations under our Magnitsky-style sanctions regime, said Adams, Britain's Minister for Asia, referring to sanctions similar to those imposed on those deemed responsible for human rights abuses under the U.S. Magnitsky Act. He was asked by lawmakers if Britain would sanction Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam. Adams said it would not be helpful to speculate on names at this stage. China's embassy did not immediately respond to a request for comment. So yeah, other sorts. I mean, again, China has already been like imposing its will over Hong Kong, and yeah, they had disqualified pro-democratic leaders. So they're already like it's a kangaroo court. So they're already just trying to consolidate power and invalidate democratic leaders and arresting them. And yeah, this is just Hong Kong slowly being sucked under the Chinese jackboot, and they're just calling for sanctions against certain officials, and already they're speculating chief executive Carrie Lam, and also the Canadian ambassador to the UN. He was also calling for investigations of genocide over the Uyghur treatment by China. So that's just something else to look at. I mean, because they talk about sanctions all they want, really, but it's just a matter of if they actually go through with it. Because unfortunately, it's going to be a situation where the West has more to lose with the sanctions than China does. And when that happens, that's going to be a weird spot. So China's, because they're going to try to take global leadership and be the next federal, or I should say, global currency, global reserve. And when that happens, who knows? Who knows what could happen? Because China has never really been in a position of global dominance, although they've been like historically advanced, far more advanced in Europe and wealthier. I mean, that's the main reason why they never actually set out to colonize, because they had so much that they're like, why would I expand? I have so much room here already. So now we could possibly see that occur. And yeah, that's not good. We don't want that, of course. But you know, it's like, imagine the Cold War with the Soviet Union, but everybody was helping the Soviet Union get rich. That I mean, so it's like it's so weird the situation we're in, because we know these are the bad guys, but we keep helping them and we keep doing business with them. So it's just like we're complicit in this, or I shouldn't say we. Uh, our global leaders and our bankers, they're doing they're the ones creating this monster. So yeah, you know, and of course they talk about how, well, I mean, you see this communist system is prevailing over the capitalist system. Well, that's because this communist system adopted capitalism for its own ends and for the party, not for the people, because there's people living in absolute poverty in China. And yeah, and it's just strange, we because they have all these playboy billionaires in China. Like, it's strange. A communist system, socialist system with billionaires. I mean, that's what they have there. And then you realize that this is more so for their clique, for their club, for the party. So yeah, something to look at there. The Communist Party there. But continuing, not necessarily. This isn't necessarily collapse talk, but I do like ancient history. And in Egypt, what occurred is that they uncovered 100 sarcophagi in ancient burial grounds, and it's said to be the biggest discovery of 2020 in Egypt. And pretty exquisite condition too. So I'm reading from ABC News. Egypt unearthed more than 100 sarcophagi in Saqqara on Saturday, the same ancient burial ground where dozens of coffins were also found last month. As the country continues to make major discoveries in its bid to lure back tourists, the coffins were exhumed from 3 burial shafts that are 12 meters deep. The head of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities, Mostafa El-Waziri, said, adding to the 59 sarcophagi discovered last month in the same area, which served as the necropolis for the ancient capital of Memphis, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's the biggest discovery of 2020, but we are not stopping here. The discovery of one burial shaft leads to another, Antiquities Minister Khaled El-Anani told reporters, quote, Saqqara hasn't yet revealed 1% of its secret. We can find tombs and burial shafts in every single spot in this area. Some of the newly uncovered coffins, which were colored and sealed, were displayed in a makeshift tent overlooking the step pyramid of Djoser in the vast necropolis. The gilded and wooden sarcophagi included mummies of priests and high-ranking officials belonging to the late and Ptolemaic periods, dating back more than 2,500 years ago. Yeah, so pretty exquisite find, and there's just so many different mummies and sarcophagi to find in these lost ancient tombs. This is something that I definitely find curious about, like just an ancient civilization being uncovered and the secrets that we're learning. So yeah, this is a new discovery, and I kind of made a joke about like, oh, it's the largest discovery uncovering ancient tombs. That certainly isn't going to haunt us. Yeah, so but it makes you think, because Egypt is special in that it's so ancient and far more advanced than we give it credit for. Because you still have people talking about the pyramids and how aliens must have invented that or helped with that, and it's just no, it's just they just knew what to do and they were dedicated and they wanted to build something to last. And the pyramids are going to last for a while. You know, that's just it's an achievement. I mean, we can't build something like that today. We can't. And we don't know how because you see all the buildings that we have, all of our structures. That's going to go within like the first millennia. Like after 1,000 years, most of these areas will be, you know, unrecognizable and returned back to the earth. So it's certainly an achievement, and not just the pyramid itself, but all the relics, all the, the hieroglyphics, right, telling of the history. Like, we can actually like, stuff like the Rosetta Stone. We can actually just read what they were writing. Uh, and who knows about our own civilization when it collapses, what exactly is going to be left behind, the records that people will remember, because there'll be an oral history, right? But that's mainly, depending on how well people are, because that's like a game of telephone over generations. So some stories will be embellished and mythologized, and those stories could be rooted in actual history. But then you have the actual record keeping and from officials and or what the actual leaders or the pharaoh was saying. So that is interesting to look at from our perspective. It's kind of like for those who might know some. It's kind of like it's it's an underrated film, or I wouldn't say underrated. It was popular for its time, but now it's been forgotten. The gods have gone mad, or it was like a South African film where this um this tribesman, he finds a Coca-Cola bottle and he doesn't know what to think of it. It's because this is like, for us it's just a bottle, but for this primitive society, a glass, just glass in general, they don't even know what that is. So it's just like, what? So I feel like that's what's going to happen for us if, well, that this is if humanity does survive and then civilization does come back, or whatever form, and the relics that they find, they look at our history and our world and the materials that we had, or alien archaeologists come down and they discover what we got. Certainly there'll be a lot of plastic left, a lot of aluminum, other non biodegradable items, or that will be, there'll be natural processes that return that to the earth. Who knows? So it's something to think about when you look at ancient history and the archaeology of today, what we're discovering, and then our history today, and say like, okay, because they were saying this was 2,500 years ago, so another 2,500 years from now, what are people going to say about our civilization? What are they going to uncover? You know, and even then, even in that time, they might still be uncovering stuff in Egypt, like so it's quite a marvel, really. At the very least, in Egypt, it's their own history, so it's kind of okay for them to take the stuff out. Yeah, because you have like in Britain all these relics and artifacts that they've discovered, and people are kind of like they're asking for it back, and they're like, no, like so at the very least in Egypt, it's their history and their heritage, so they're uncovering it. So that's something I wanted to talk about there. Kind of circling back with coronavirus, talking about in Sweden, because they were trying to do the herd immunity strategy. Say what you want about it, but I'm just going to talk really quickly about what's happening now as of October 15th. And so just reading from there, they're reporting of new cases on the rise. Well, Sweden reported 1,000 new cases on Thursday, but the country's top epidemiologist said a recent rise in new infections was not the sign of a second wave. Sweden, which has shunned lockdowns, leaving most schools, restaurants, and businesses open throughout the pandemic, has seen the number of new cases trending higher since early September. Many European countries are reintroducing restrictions to prevent the COVID-19 spread after a spike in transmissions. State epidemiologist Anders Tegnell said countries like the Netherlands, France, and Spain were experiencing a second wave, but this was not the case in Sweden. That would take a rather substantial spread in large parts of society that we are not at all seeing in Sweden, he told reporters, adding, however, that the recent increase in cases needs to be taken very seriously. So this was in October, and now they're also reporting that the trend is still rising, so they're experiencing cases there. Of course, in Sweden, it's a very different place. So they have a smaller population, lower density, a lot of villages, sparsely populated villages. So, you can compare it to us in the United States, but we're two very different countries. It's more to do with the actual strategy, and their strategy was they had the least restrictive lockdown out of all these countries. And yeah, we can, they probably haven't had as much deaths, of course. I mean, they have, in general, the Scandinavian countries have a better healthcare system. Doesn't mean, though, that they can't be overrun with cases and patients. So it's something to look at. Of course, now that they're experiencing those cases and those trends rising again, just all across Europe in general. And also, they're revealing now with vitamin D deficiencies and how that plays a part with your response to the COVID infection. So I've certainly tried to get more sunlight or take vitamin D supplements. They're in Sweden, however, and that's more closer to the Arctic Circle. So who knows about that exposure to sunlight, but the people will fare fine. I'm pretty sure that they have their own measures, and there's like this Nordic concoction, I think from like fish oil supplements, right, where they can get their vitamin D. So they've already been dealing with that for some time, so they know how to deal with it. But again, it's something to look at. Let me read further, right? Sweden reported 3 new deaths on Thursday, taking the total number of COVID-19 deaths to 5,910. In terms of the overall population, that rate is several times higher than Nordic neighbors, but lower than countries like Spain, Italy, and Britain that opted for lockdowns. So, yeah. So in terms of the Nordic countries around them, they had the most deaths or higher deaths, but lower than countries with that went for the lockdown. So, but then again, those countries have higher populations and different demographics. So, yeah, there's certainly a lot of factors to take into account. I'm curious about their mask situation, if they're anti-mask or whatever. I don't think they are. I think it just had more to do with the lockdown itself and telling people how to live their lives. I think that's what they were opting for. But that's in Sweden, and again, that's something to keep an eye on. I thought it was saying November 15th. That was probably why I should have picked a different article. But yeah, as it says, it's already been reported that cases are still on the rise there. So yeah, there's that. Another situation that's occurring, it's not necessarily COVID related, is in Peru, which kind of flew over my head. Or just a lot of people in general just don't pay attention with Latin America. But there's been unrest with their presidency, and they've had some transitions of power. And they're reporting that Peruvians, they've had 3 presidents in a week. So there's some real unrest there. So let me read from the Associated Press. Peru swore in its 3rd president in just over a week, Tuesday, in a televised ceremony that residents of the fraught South American country watched with both hope and skepticism after the worst constitutional crisis in 2 decades. Donning the red and white presidential sash, Francisco Sagasti promised to restore trust in the government and paid homage to 2 young men who died during protests that erupted last week when Congress voted to oust a popular predecessor. We can't bring them back to life, he said, but we can stop this from happening again. In Lima, many said they were cautiously optimistic the elder statesman could steer the country back to stability after a week of upheaval, but Sagasti has a steep road ahead. Young Peruvians, still angry at a government they see as self-interested and corrupt, marched in the capital after the ceremony. Congress remains full of squabbling political parties that have pushed two presidents out in the course of one 5-year term, and Sagasti has just 5 months in office before the presidential election. In my 63 years, I've never seen a good president, said Victor Mazarina, as he stood outside the Congress offering to exchange a Peruvian currency, the sol, for dollars. I hope this one is different. Peru plunged into turmoil last week when Congress voted to oust ex-president Martin Vizcarra. Protesters filled the street, decrying the move as a parliamentary coup. Legislators swore in a little-known politician and rice farmer as the country's interim leader, but he resigned 5 days later after most of his cabinet resigned and demonstrations turned violent. For more than 24 hours, Peru had no designated president. An engineer by training, Sagasti became Peru's chief of state a day after being voted in as the leader of Congress because Manuel Moreno had no vice president when he resigned Sunday. That made Sagasti next in line. He is a respected scholar whose works include a book titled Democracy and Good Governance in 1996. He was among those taken hostage by Tupac Amaru rebels at the Japanese ambassador's residence in Lima. So so he's had a pretty good or pretty interesting career, especially with the hostage situation. I read about that once. Sagasti's reputation as a consensus builder makes him an apt choice for the moment, said Michael Shifter, who is head of the Inter-American Dialogue think tank and knows the new president. Quote, he always had ideas about trying to build bridges in Peru, Shifter said. That's what he really stood for. The 76-year-old centrist lawmaker spent the initial hours after becoming head of Congress on Monday visiting hospitals where injured protesters were recovering and promising to do everything in his power to bring hope back to Peru. So, yeah, a lot of unrest there, a lot of different events occurring in Peru that I totally, missed on. I mean, that's quite a bit of 3 presidents within a week. In protests there, I mean, people are just protesting the government. I would assume it's a wave of anti-neoliberal policies, or the pink wave as they're calling it. So it's probably a little more of a left-wing push there. Actually, I have a friend who's Peruvian, so I'll probably ask her about some more details there. But I would assume it's the same like conditions and demographics in Peru as we see in Bolivia. So there's certainly an indigenous population, impoverished indigenous population. Historically, they've already been dealing with rebels and terrorists there, so it's not out of the question for that to continue there. So yeah, so Peru has seen that. Also in Latin America, not necessarily collapse related, but it's just an interesting turn of events. We've talked about marijuana legalization in the 5 states with the recent general election that occurred. And also in Texas, they're trying to push through with the Democrats in Congress, the state Congress. They're trying to push through legalization there, which won't happen so long as the lieutenant governor, the governor, and the attorney general are in power. They're not going to do anything to legalize marijuana. But in Texas, or I should say in Mexico, the Senate committee is starting to, draw up a vote. So they're trying to move ahead with it. Already, Mexico has decriminalized it in a lot of ways. So this would move forward with legalization and taxation, which some people are skeptical about it because already politicians have been bought up by the cartels. So that would cut into their profit line. So who knows if these governor or these politicians actually move ahead with it. But it's certainly interesting to see Mexico, which Mexico is run by the Mexican government, of course, but then you also look at the cartels who very openly run certain parts of the area, like the country, like it's just their land. Like that's they have it. So interesting to see that there and what that will bode for. They're gonna vote on it next week. So yeah, certainly something to keep an eye on. And if they actually move forward with legalization, like with, I don't know, like people are still genuinely like, even if they're not anti-pot, they still like look down on people who smoke on it or people who advocate for legalization. Like, yeah, it's not just about getting high. It's about personal choice. It's about prohibition, personal freedoms, because prohibition, if it didn't work for alcohol, what makes you think it's going to work for this, for a plant that doesn't kill people, you know? And they focus on, you know, one person who just sits around and smokes and not looking at the other people who smoke and work just fine. Um, but it's interesting, right? Because we talk about legalization criminally, but then you're still going to have to deal with these corporations and these jobs who are still going to drug test you. So even if you're not going to get arrested, you still might not be able to get a job. So, and then of course, like that's the company's choice. The company, they don't want people smoking. Like the people are going to justify the company telling you what to do on your off time. Like people will do, like it's kind of mind-boggling to see how far people will justify corporations ruling our lives. It's like people back in the medieval ages where they were saying, well, what about the king? He has the divine right to rule. It's that same mentality, at least in my mind. So what about the elites? They have rights also. They have the right to hoard wealth and tell you how to live your life, right? So that's something that I was just thinking about. Again, people kind of just throw it out to the side, but it's like, dude, if we're gonna have an apocalypse, let me at least smoke pot in peace, Like, because the last thing I need is to be arrested over a plant when the planet is literally burning alive? And it just goes to show that we're not exactly as free as we think. We're not, you know. So yeah, who knows there. So that's about all I could really brush up on in the international field with this world right now. So I'll just jump into the natural segment. And I want to talk about climate change at least, or with our emissions of greenhouse gases. We have the Green New Deal, and people are. I'm seeing a trend where people are slowly starting to like be pro fossil fuels and pro fracking, pro oil. And look, I get it. We need jobs, right? People need to work. Yeah, like we need that. People, their livelihoods depend on that. But you see stuff like this, reports like this, that they're not going to focus on, where they don't pay attention to the fact that we've already been emitting these gases for the last 200 years, since the industrial age, starting in the early 19th century to now. So all of that has been emitted, and it's only been rising more exponentially in the last 50 years. That's exponentially, it's skyrocketed. It's I mean, looking at the graphs, it's depressing. It's like a punch in the gut, really. And so we have all that carbon that's been building up. And I was reading somewhere that the heat that we're experiencing now is from the carbon that was released in the 80s and the 70s. So it's only been rising exponentially, and it's still rising, and it doesn't look like it's going down. It doesn't. And this is what I mean when we say we have to stop it. We have to cut some carbon, not just the US, but the world. People don't like to hear that, but we have to if we're gonna, if we want to keep a habitable planet, if we don't want to turn this into a second Venus. Uh, so what they're saying from Business Insider is that now we're past the point of carbon neutral, right? We're past that point. They're saying, the net zero by 2050 is no longer possible. Like this is the worst of the worst. Like this is just the worst. I don't know how else to say it. So now they're talking about measures to suck the carbon out of the atmosphere, right? So, reading from Business Insider, right? Even if we were to stop emitting greenhouse gases right now, the Earth would continue to warm for centuries. Their researchers are suggesting sucking carbon out of the atmosphere and storing it underground, and other geoengineering measures. Like at one point, Bill Gates was saying, he was going to launch a rocket and try to put dust in the air to try to block out the sun, which would create an ice age and create worse damage. Let me read further. So, yeah. So even if we stopped emitting gases, or quote, even if we stopped emitting greenhouse gases today, the Earth would continue to warm for centuries. Arctic ice and permafrost are already on an irreversible path of melting. That's the finding of a new research published Thursday in the Journal of Scientific Reports, or in the journal Scientific Reports. The model suggests that even if emissions were to drop to zero this year, global temperatures would ultimately rise to be 5.4 degrees Fahrenheit higher in 2500 than they were in 1850. That's 3 degrees Celsius. The tundra will continue to melt over the next 500 years, irrespective of how quickly humanity cuts its greenhouse gas emissions, Jorgen Randers, the lead author of the new study, told Business Insiders. That's because climate change is a vicious self-sustaining cycle. As permafrost thaws, it releases more greenhouse gases like methane and carbon dioxide, which sustains warming over time. To stop that cycle, Randers said, we'll need to suck carbon dioxide back out of the atmosphere. 8 feet of sea level rise. The study modeled the effects of various emission reductions scenarios on the Earth's climate between 1850 and 2500. The data showed that if emissions stopped for good in 2020, sea levels in 2050 would still be more than 8 feet higher than in 1850. And then to prevent the projected 3 degree Celsius temperature increase, greenhouse gas emissions would need to have ceased entirely between 1960 and 1970, the model found. In that sense, Earth blew by a climatic point of no return 50 years ago, before much of the public understood the realities of climate change. Yes, that is an irony, Randers said, but of course the scientific community knew about global warming already in the 1960s. So it's already too late. Like this is the mentality, because you have accelerationists, and this is really what people are increasingly people are just accepting an accelerationist mindset where it's too late, so crank it up. Let's get this oil out. Like it's wow. This is what I mean. This is what I mean when I say we're fucked, and people don't pay attention. you know. So definitely, if we're gonna take my advice, avoid coastal properties, ocean line properties. Just avoid that, especially Florida. Avoid that. uh, I don't know. Yeah, so they're talking about measures to suck the carbon out of the atmosphere, but that's not exactly profitable, or at least it's not yet. I mean, you could plant more trees, more plant life. That's the natural way to do it. But hey, that's why plant trees when you could get all that sweet oil out of the ground. I don't know. So, and even then, even with planting all those trees, it still wouldn't do enough because it's just too much carbon. So, the only way I see it is that conditions get so bad for civilization that industrial civilization just collapses overnight, and maybe then nature can rebalance itself. Because you you see a lot of people talking about how overpopulation is a myth, right? And they try to frame that as an eco-fascist mindset. It's not necessarily eco-fascism. It's just there's a certain point where there are too many people, and the environment can't sustain it because we're extracting so many resources. It's going to get to a point where the biodiversity collapses and all sorts of it's a domino effect, right? So we have the food chain collapsing with the insects insects are already dying off. That affects the food chain, accelerating the mass extinction, which is currently in effect already. And it's going to get worse and worse and worse. And humans are going to be the last thing standing. And who knows what kind of planet will be left after that. So it'll be like urban dwelling pests, right? Rats, cockroaches, pigeons, right? And like burrowing animals, but no like megafauna, no wildlife really to see, to find, really, to recognize. But the whole point of this article is saying that it's already too late. And by 2500, we can already see the effects there. I mean, it would be a miracle if humanity actually survived to the end of this century. It would be a miracle if industrial civilization actually made it. And even then, by 2100, it's going to be worse. It's going to be so worse. It's just, I don't see humanity surviving this millennia without, some kind of catastrophe occurring. So, yeah, so there's that. Sucking carbon out of the atmosphere is certainly something to think about. But again, they're saying that if we were to avoid those temperature increases, we had to stop completely in the 60s and 70s. And that's past. It's past. So, yeah, what are you going to do? But, enough with like depressing news. I wanted to talk about something that was a bit. I like when I read it, it kind of felt good about it, or I felt good about it. And ironic enough, it's from goodnewsnetwork.org. So it's just, trying to make people feel good and, okay. But it concerns the UK establishing uh, a large marine preserve in the Atlantic. It's the largest in the Atlantic, the fourth largest on the planet. But this marine reserve is around this archipelago. Let me read actually. So, quote, centered around the small archipelago of Tristan da Cunha in the Southern Pacific, governments and ecological organizations have created the fourth largest marine protected area on Earth, the largest in the Atlantic Ocean. Spanning 265,000 square miles, Tristan da Cunha is almost 3 times as big as the island of Great Britain and will protect tens of millions of native migratory birds, rare migratory sharks, whales, seals, golden undersea forests of kelp, and penguins, collectively valued as a UNESCO World Heritage Site from illegal mining, fishing, and other extractive activities. The government of the small UK territorial island announced on Thursday that, in partnership with the UK government, the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, and the National Geographic's Pristine Seas initiative, it would conserve its surrounding oceans to help achieve the goal to secure protections of 30% of the world's oceans by 2030. Quote, the community, a small chain of islands over 6,000 miles from London and the South Atlantic, has declared that almost 700,000 kilometers squared of its waters will join the UK's blue belt of marine protection, becoming the largest no-take zone in the Atlantic and the fourth largest on the planet, end quote, reads a local government statement. The Blue Belt program has protected 4 million square miles of ocean habitat since its inception in 2016, owing to the UK's territorial ownership of many remote island chains like the South Georgia, South Sandwich Islands, and Tristan da Cunha. So, yeah, that's something to feel good about. At least, World Heritage Site, protected site from, mining and fishing in those areas. Uh, so, yeah, I mean that's good, at least protecting those animals there. That's certainly not going to stop illegal fishermen, particularly from China. They're still gonna try to fish in those areas. Uh, I mean, they just have a pirate fishing fleet. That's really what it is. But if you try to stop them, you're effectively, because they have some weird program where they have like a militia, like a marine militia. So if you try to intercept one of their fishing fleets, you're effectively intercepting a Chinese naval vessel, and that can start problems. So, but yeah, this is internationally recognized, protected area. Hopefully they'll patrol those areas and try to keep illegal fishermen out of there, protecting that pristine environment. But yeah, they already have a program where they have millions of square miles of protected area, so that's good. I wanted to touch up on that. There's a lot of depressing stuff that I talk about, but this was something good. At least, uh, you know, anybody can make a protected area, but we actually have to protect it. So we'll see about that. Uh, but yeah, just a remote part of the world and keeping the birds and the penguins safe from bad people. So we have that there. And also, what occurred was a hurricane hit Central America in Nicaragua. Um, a category 5. I think it made landfall as a category 4, but it was a category 5, like for sustained for at least a day or so. And it followed the same path, practically the same path as Hurricane Ida. This is Hurricane Iota. Hurricane Iota hit like yesterday, um, and raining and flooding there, damage. Um, it was kind of like the storm surge. It hit like a tsunami. But yeah, we had a Category 5 storm in mid-November, and I've been making predictions that the storm season would go on to November, which it's not really. I mean, it's kind of goes without saying at this point, but it's just interesting to see these storms are still forming. I'm gonna say it's gonna continue into December. Like we might see a storm. We might see a storm around Christmas time. That would be something. If we have a real storm by that point, that would be interesting to see. And it would be interesting if the warm oceans stay warm enough, could we have storms just year round form? Has that ever really been a thing? Because as I talked about before, the ice caps are melting, and it's not just the sea level rise that occurs from there, but also the convection of the jet stream and other fluctuations there, and how that influences weather patterns. We have the Arctic blast that's been occurring these last couple winters, so that's certainly going to be a thing this winter. Uh, but it's certainly something to look at, something to think about if the oceans stay warm enough to a point where you just have these weather systems year round, which would be interesting. So there's something to look at. But yeah, Central America got hit hard with these storms, uh, which is unfortunate for them. And they've had to deal with that. I mean, they're having relief efforts there, and people have been donating, so that's good at least. So people are doing their part. But again, you don't really hear anything from the mainstream media about about Category 5 storm in mid-November. And they'll report on that. They'll be like, "Huh, well, this is odd," but they're not going to tell you why. They're not going to tell you why this is odd and why this isn't something that is normal. But again, the media at this point, they're not really reporting anything. It's just it's just a it's like TMZ at this point. They're just telling you, "Whoa, look at Nancy Pelosi and her gelato collection." Like that's really what it's occurring right now. They're not really gonna tell you what's happening and how this is going to affect us and what to be ready for. You're not going to hear about reports of panic buying, because if they actually report on panic buying, that's going to create more panic buying. So yeah, we'll see there. But that was something to keep an eye on. And again, we could get another storm later on. So it's just, yeah, this is just an unusually active hurricane season, and it's only going to get more active as the years go on and as the heat records continue to be broken. Again, this November has been warm, very warm. It's good to at least go out and get some sunlight and in shortened t-shirts. But yeah, for November, it's very warm, very warm. So there's that. But what are you gonna do, right? Um, and for our last segment, I kind of talking a little bit more about COVID, but more to do with people buying fake tests, buying fake COVID tests, so that way they can go on like cruise and they can travel. Yeah, so this is something that's happening. So I'll read from Insider, right? Around the world, some people are attempting to bypass travel requirements by purchasing counterfeit coronavirus test results on the black market. Despite coronavirus cases being on the rise globally, many tourist destinations can't afford to close their borders to foreigners. Instead, they've implemented strict requirements on who can and cannot enter, usually demanding proof of a negative test uh, taken with a certain pre-arrival timeframe. But not everyone seems to be on board with this simple step stipulation, with reports of counterfeit test results cropping up in different countries. Whether people are unable to obtain a test in time or simply unwilling to take it is unclear. As air travel slowly bounces back, the number of daily travelers passing through TSA checkpoints was down to fewer than 100,000 early on during the pandemic, compared to an average of over 2 million pre-pandemic, and has recently increased to around 800,000 a day. It is especially important to be able to trust visitors and fellow travelers. But the travel industry is beginning to crack down on this fraudulent activity with digital uploading requirements and apps such as Common Pass. And then they were saying that counterfeit test results are appearing in uh, Brazil and Bangladesh. So yeah, this is certainly, people are. This really shows how no matter what country you're from, if you're a tourist, chances are you suck. Um, of course, I'm not saying if you like to travel, you're a shitty person, but a lot of people who travel are shitty. They're just, and this is what I mean, because they don't want to get tests, or maybe they feel entitled, like, well, I'm not COVID positive. I don't need a test. I'll give you a fake one. Like, I don't know what it is. Again, it could just be how difficult it is to get a result, get a test. I still haven't been tested, so I don't know if I even have antibodies or anything like that. It it's been a pain in the ass. Even when I've been in contact with people who were sick, I couldn't get a test. They were saying, "Well, you have to show symptoms." Well, what's the point? Because if I'm showing symptoms, then I am sick. It's just so that could be this, just the difficulties of getting a test. Because I honestly don't know where I can get one, but it's you know like I saw a comment somewhere where people were saying, like, I thought that trope where people were hiding a zombie bite was bullshit, but apparently it's not. This is these are the people who would lie about getting bit by a zombie and then bringing it to your people. uh, and again, yeah, there were people during the initial outbreak who were purposefully trying to get people sick. Like, it was just, yeah, you saw some weird people suck. People really suck, and if they can, you know even if it's for a bad reason, if they have a purpose greater than themselves, they'll do it. So if somebody can go around getting other people sick, they can feel accomplished. Like, I got, like, it's strange. This pandemic really shows the worst in a lot of people, and you know, and people are going back on cruise ships. Anybody going on a cruise ship right now is suspect right now. Like, well, even before, when people were talking about cruises, I'm like, okay, this is not somebody I want to be around with. Like, if you think a cruise ship is a good time out, then you must have some deficiency somewhere. Because, like, being stuck on a cruise sounds like the worst experience of my life, especially, you know, if you're hit with a storm of some kind, or not even that, just the people you're surrounded by, even before the COVID pandemic, the different diseases you're opening up to. Like, I have certain relatives who are already, like, bragging about traveling now, and had somebody say that they bought a ticket, like, they bought a ticket early on in the lockdown because it was cheap, not even thinking about what the world was going to be like. Because she bought it in February when it started for January. So January is starting to roll around now. And even now, we don't know what kind of world is going to be, what we're going to be in January. Uh, you know, again, I just need to learn to keep my mouth shut and just stop worrying about other people's survival, because they're gonna they've made their bed and they're gonna lie in it, and they think they're gonna, again, I think things are gonna go bad for them, because I'm just a naturally pessimistic person. But you see that there's a lot of people with this optimism bias who are incapable of understanding the global situation and understanding, because they think, oh, well, I don't want to live in fear. It's not living in fear, it's being vigilant and not being stupid. That's what it is ultimately. So it's not living in fear, it's just being smart. Again, people just want to live their lives. I just want things to go back to normal. Well, normal is gone. This is normal now. You know, again, there's only so much I can do, but I just need to keep my mouth shut because yeah, the more I try to tell people how to, react to this, the more alienated I am because I'm basically like ruining the party. Oh man, you're killing my groove, man. Now I'm getting all depressed and understanding my mortality. So again, I read somewhere also a comment considering George Carlin. It said, if you tell the truth, you have to make people laugh or they'll kill you. So yeah, I guess I gotta tone up my comedic skills, but yeah, I mean, people are just they want the party to keep going, and the party ended long ago. Like you're just so, it's like I realized the music ended like months and years ago. People are still dancing, like waiting for the DJ to bring it back. Like, come on, he's gonna start it up. Like, no, it's done. Like, I don't know what to tell you. So yeah, so there's that. So yeah, travelers and you know people perceiving that the pandemic is over when it still is clearly ramping up and going to get worse from here. So yeah, so we'll have to see there. But that's what I wanted to say about the natural field. Had a lot of things to say in this episode, but again, before I close out on some things, just wanted to talk about, at least with Thanksgiving rolling around. Chances are I'm going to record before the Thanksgiving holidays for next week, um, or probably not. I might, I just might give myself a break, honestly. But then again, it would just be, it's just with this holiday season, people are going to have a lot to say. And even now I don't feel too comfortable going, but I'm just going to go because it's just nice to be around people. And then of course, people, like, if you don't follow through with their plans, they're going to talk about you. So is that part too, like the gossip, and it's I'm going to go. I'm just going to go, but just to this one thing for a couple days, and then I'm out. People can complain all they want, but you know I just want to stay isolated, especially now. But yeah, it'll be nice. It'll be nice to see some folks and eat, drink, you know, just to have a good time out. But yeah, this holiday season, it's it always seems I'm in the spot where like I have to get people presents, but it's like, you know, the presents shouldn't really matter, or I don't know. I'm not, you know, I've been working dead end jobs, so it's not exactly that I have much to save up on, and I have to pay for rent, which is sometimes up to like $700. So like I have no savings. I can't save anything up, you know. And it's not like I work for, you know, Lifetime or something like that, where these rich assholes live. So like I don't have the patience to work for rich assholes. So I work, yeah, working class jobs, blue collar jobs, at least for millennial, and even those wages aren't enough. But yeah, yeah, I can talk about my finances all I want, but it's just those holiday seasons roll around, and they always say that it's not about the presents when it very obviously is, and you're judged on your ability to provide presents. So it's just like there's a lot of social pressure to buy stuff, you know, like I don't expect anything, I don't expect anything, but again, I'm the one who has to buy presents for whomever. I'm honestly just gonna probably get something for my mom. Like everybody else can shut up, really. Uh, it hasn't been the best year for her, so at least I can get something for her. But yeah, it's just like, you know, it's not about the presents, and then ostensibly at the same time they're saying, well, you never get us anything, or it's like, again, I shouldn't surround myself with those people in general, but then when you're own flesh and blood, it's like, what else can I do? And I'm not exactly in the position where I can build my own family, so it's like I'm stuck with these people. Anyway, but yeah, the holidays are always a fascinating, always the best time of year for family and friends. Luckily, I don't have any creepy uncles, so I can just rest easy there. But yeah, it's just this has been a rough year for everybody, obviously. And yeah, there's certain people that who I've visited in certain years who I'm not going to visit this year for whatever reason, and they're gonna, I don't know. It's like it's one of those situations where like they're not gonna invite me because they've already decided they're not gonna invite me, but I decided long ago that I wasn't gonna go. So it's like it's stupid. It's stupid, really. Like it all started because I bought a gun, and then weeks later the riots broke out. So it's like I don't have to apologize for anything. Now I don't want to get too personal about it, but it's just like, you know, yeah, whatever. So yeah, holidays rolling around. I'm sure some of y'all have your own personal family drama to deal with. So we can all just, this should be a time to be with people who give you peace of mind. That's ultimately what it should be. So they might bitch and moan and complain that, oh, well, you're not really with us. Just spend time with the people who give you peace of mind, who make you feel at home, who genuinely love you instead of just saying it, you know? Like we go to people who show that they love you, not, saying it so they can, get in your head. But again, that's really just what I want to say there. And yeah, so before I wrap up, just some quick plugs, right? With my Patreon, and then who see who else joins in. But yeah, so I'm gonna release that on Patreon first, and then release it on the other platforms later on. For $1, just $1 a month for other listeners, you can find that on Collapse Talk at Patreon. My YouTube channel, Collapse Talk, where I also release my content. Twitter at Collapse Talk Pod, and other platforms that I'll plug in. But for now, really just get your preps in order because this isn't over. Who knows what Black Friday will bring? Of course, with Black Friday now, people do more buying on online, Digital Monday, but we'll see about Black Friday sales and what goes down. If anything does happen with Thanksgiving, because there's going to be whole bunch of families that are going to meet up, and it's not going to be all peaceful there. But again, you know, it's the time to just reflect on this year and how we've all dealt with it, and to be with those who bring you peace and just share the love, right? But yeah, so that's all I really had to say there. So thanks for tuning in this episode. I hope y'all are staying healthy, staying safe, and you know definitely eat up. I need to start slimming down, start eating a little bit better so that way I can eat all I want, but definitely get your fill in. But yeah, that's all for this episode. Thanks for tuning in.